All right, it is 9:04 a.m. on Thursday, the 4th of June. May the 4th be with you. And it's 2026, and I am heading to an AI meetup. I was kind of tempted to not go just because it's about 30 miles away. It's in Duluth, but I've really been enjoying every single meetup that I've gone to. And this morning, even though I had some workful needfuls, I was like, well, I could stay home and do these things right now and get them out of the way, or I could go out and do this like I had originally planned and have a little bit of socializing early in the morning. And ultimately I was like, I should go. Like, there's no reason not to. And man, watching people drive is just absolutely insane. I feel like I'm in the middle of some sort of like David Attenborough, scenes from the Savannah or something like that. People just drive so incredibly erratic. I'm just like, how are there not even more crashes than the ones that obviously do occur? Like, I just feel like it says something for our cognitive abilities, for sure, to be able to traverse ground at speed and not get in as many wrecks. So I don't give our faculties as much credit, I guess, as they deserve, because I'm just like, man, it just seems like every 10th person is driving extremely aggressively. It's almost like they have like a vendetta against everyone and everything in their way, and that it's like an imposition for anyone else to exist on these roads, which is not too surprising. I listened to this very interesting Notebook LM breakdown of a Big Think, which is basically like TED Talk presentation by a guy. I struggle to say that I don't really like him, but I think that's just because of me physically judging him. Every time I've actually listened to him speak, it just sounds exactly like stuff that I absolutely agree with. And so maybe it's just, familiarity breeds contempt or something like that. But he's the writer of a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fook, if you'll pardon the words themselves. I don't remember his name exactly, but I put his talk into Notebook LM, and I'm not entirely sure. I never listened to the actual talk. These days, if something looks interesting, I'll just plug it directly into Notebook LM and get a Notebook LM take on it. I figure it'll hit the high points, and besides, a rose by any other name is still a rose, so if there's good stuff to get, I think Notebook LM will do a good job of retrieving it. But I should look this up because it's going to be a little bit disappointing with my summation of it. But more or less, there are 3 stages of human cognitive growth, I suppose you could call it, or states of maturity. And let's just say the first one is, infantile awareness, where nothing really outside of yourself makes sense, and then you develop into stage 2, which is like adolescence. And one of the points that Notebook LM made that I really, really harped on, because for me it was more important than memorizing whatever stage 3 is, because it's just like, well, I get it, like stage 3 would be like a very empathetic, compassionate, and also aware of others state of being, where you traverse the world with the assumption that it's actually not all about you. But the Notebook LM recording mentioned that, and I've had this exact same thought, we're not here to quote unquote get better. Like, that's not why I think human beings exist. I don't think that's why the world exists. We do have that capacity, but it requires additional energy and calories and friction to get there. You don't just become a better person because you've lived longer. And so Notebook LM was talking about how there is absolutely no reason for any human being to progress beyond stage 2, and in fact many people likely live and die within that stage of cognitive emotional awareness, and I just can't help but see that watching people drive, because I'm just like, man, why why would it seem worth it to drive so aggressively in a situation where if you make a single miscalculation, it could end your life, end the person's life that you hit, or otherwise just completely ruin the otherwise tranquility promised by any given day? You know, you can pursue tranquility as much as you can pursue aggression. But it's funny because this leads me to another thought. It's from an Andrew Huberman episode where he was talking about how people enjoy feeling anger more than almost any other feeling. There was some experiment that was done. I don't know how they did this because it sounds very invasive. But basically, let's just say, to make it really blunt, like people could push a button and they could feel a modicum of like pleasure, or they could push a button and it would make them feel angry. And by and large, people pressed the button that made them feel angry. And that's kind of fascinating because that kind of goes into my general understanding of how human beings work and what I've experienced as a human being, where it does feel very good to be angry because you just feel so justified and so right. And, you know, again, I've tried to, like, quote unquote, like, geotag this feeling when I feel it as a severe indication that proceeding with whatever that feeling is telling me to do should not be done. And, you know, it's more difficult. It really is sort of almost exponentially more difficult the more anger you feel, but you kind of have to, I don't know, that's why you have to get out in front of it so that you can stop it from snowballing into a larger and larger mass. But yeah, I mean, just getting through the downtown part of 85 this morning, it's like watching thieves fight over booty. I can't think of a better way to describe it. It's just like everyone is so cutthroat. And I mean, I was cut off several times by people. And again, I don't get angry. I sit there in absolute wonder, and I'm just like, why would you do something like that? You turn so jerkily, you speed up so quickly, you brake so like suddenly, and like people who follow the cars in front of them just like right on their bumper. I'm just like, dude, that is like so crazy that's your default way of traversing space. You know, I know that Atlanta brings that out of people, which is too bad for people who are sensitive to that being brought out from. But man, it's just so bizarre. Like I was going to take 78. I've discussed this before. It's like my favorite road to take in and out of Atlanta. But I didn't have a lot of confidence that I would get to my destination in good enough time to like not really, I mean, it's not, you can't really be late. I think it's purely a social thing. So, you know, show up at 9:35 or 9:40. It's not like people are going to be like, oh, you have to leave. But I have really enjoyed coming to these events and being just a little bit early so I can talk to the people who are putting on the events before the main crowd gets there, you know, to not ingratiate, but I guess to introduce myself a little bit before whatever madness happens, you know. And so here I am. I've got about, I don't know how many more miles, 6.3 until I get to the exit that'll take me towards Duluth. Duluth is like not an area I have a lot of familiarity with. It's kind of a little bit, well, it's a decent amount north and a decent amount west from Lilburn, Georgia, where I grew up. And so it's a little bit too far out for me to really ever meaningfully explore. I think my dude Ben might have like lived in that area at some point in the recent past. So hey, shout out to you, Ben, and to Lucy and Liz for that matter. But yeah, I'm here. I just listened to another clip, another Notebook LM episode about what I did last night, which I have to say I really enjoyed my recording last night, and the gas man showed up shortly after I finished. I made my dinner and stuff like that. Duluth Highway. And so I was in a good state, and it took him probably all of like 3 minutes to turn on my gas, and he was a pretty cool guy. I think he said he was 38, which was kind of shocking because I was like looking at him, and you know, like one of my favorite things to do is like guess how old people are based on how old I am and like what different lifestyles can do to change that number, the perception of that number up or down. So if like someone is like relatively, well, I don't know, there's like a lot of visual factors that I've actually never sat down and tried to like write out as the tools that I actually use, but I try to give a certain guess. It's always intuitive, and it's something that just kind of bubbles up from me being like, I think I know how much life you have lived approximately. And I'd say I'm usually pretty close within 1 or 2 years, which maybe is actually maybe 3 to 5 is more accurate. And I don't know, in the span of a human life, 3 to 5 years of accuracy on either side. Most people can probably do this, but it's something I enjoy doing when I feel like I've really locked in on a number based on a couple of questions and just a visual pat down, And yeah, the evening was pretty domestic beyond that. I had finished all of my needfuls. I still need to test my new bike chain because I'm not entirely convinced that it is going to be a smooth transition. I need to check this map. What does it say? 3 miles, okay. I still need to test it and test it under load, because if it's going to skip at all, it's going to skip under load. So I need to find a decent hill, go through my gears one by one, and then just hope that if the skipping is present, it will present itself, because if it is skipping, I'll need to go buy a new cassette, which I would certainly prefer not to do, because that is maybe double or 2.5 times the price of a chain. It's funny, I went into Loose Nuts yesterday, local bike shop, closest one to my house, and I asked for their cheapest SRAM 11-speed chain, and it was still $30-something, which I think is a little bit more expensive than it would have been if I had gone to REI or something like that. But it's a local bike shop, so I don't mind paying a upcharge to kind of help my dudes out. I gotta think having a bike shop is a hard deal. When I went to the bike school in Portland, Oregon in 2015, when we did the shop portion of the course, which was all about how to successfully run a bike shop, the instructor himself, he said, if you want to make $1 million with a bike shop, basically start with $2 million. And so I was like, damn, that's from a dude who surely knows. And I'm sure that's true too. You don't go into bike shops as an owner operator because you want to be rich. You do it because I guess you enjoy the work enough to want to go through all of the process of being that specific kind of entrepreneur, and God bless him. I would never want to do that. It's funny because I listen to the Moonshot's podcast so often, and again, these are 4 or 5 people that are very, very keyed into the entrepreneurial space, and traditional entrepreneurship seems just really, really stressful. I've seen people in my life start their own companies, and it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of thankless work, and honestly, I don't know. Well, I guess the reason you do it is because you don't want to work for somebody else. But man, I gotta tell you, it's pretty nice working for somebody else and doing a minimal amount of, it's just the cognitive load that is required to basically start your own business. It, to me, has always been a eliminating factor for me to want to do it. I don't know. I think that with AI, that could change. I certainly have been inspired by Peter Diamandis and all the Moonshot mates to consider entrepreneurial ventures that I might be uniquely qualified to pursue. But in general, I'm just no, I'd rather just have a W-2 and have that basically be the extent of my experience with taxes and governmental, licenses and all that kind of stuff. I feel like that's better done by other people, because I just don't really care enough so far to want to venture out with my own self as the sole proprietor, my dude. I'm just trying to make sure I'm going the right way, because I don't know where I'm going. Oh my god. Okay, so I need to take a right. Let's hope no one's zooming up beside me. Sugarloaf Parkway, here we come. It's a weird name for a road too. I always just imagine a Sugarloaf, just a loaf of bread wrapped in plastic with like a glaze over it. I'm sure that there's some specific history to the name of the road, as all roads have such histories, but at least for me, ignorant to whatever that history is, I'm just picturing a sugary loaf, which is funny. I don't really take that road very seriously. I'm like, what, you just got like a bunch of bakeries or something like that? Like, what is this road's etymology, And so here we are coming down, getting onto Sugarloaf proper, and I'm surprised that there's pedestrian crosswalks here. So far, I would say that this area reminds me of everything else I would expect to see in an area like this. I'm actually only 8 minutes away, which is kind of shocking. I was hoping that I would talk about AI to some degree, but I suppose I may not. Was there anything in the things? Well, I listened to a Notebook LM podcast this morning about the paper that I was referring to last night that Anthropic just released about Opus 4.8, and it was pretty interesting. It was a little bit of a different take than the 2-minute paper episode that I had watched on YouTube about the same paper, but I'm also very skeptical of how much of the paper Notebook LM actually quote-unquote read. That's like one of the interesting things about these systems right now, is that their attention is very limited, and apparently, for lack of a better word, they appear to take lazy routes to task completion, even sometimes outright lying, just to say that they did the thing. It's kind of funny because, we really lack a meaningful vocabulary when it comes to describing other things, other intelligences, and specifically artificial intelligence, because lying is not really, it's too emotionally laden of a word to describe what these things are actually doing. Like, if you think about the way that they're trained, which is to be helpful, honest, and harmless to the user, they have been trained with data that says, like, your top priority is to be those three things: helpful, honest, and harmless. And so rather than being unhelpful, they will do the best thing that they can do to satisfy what they have been trained to be rewarded for doing, which is to give you a definitive answer about something, And so they were looking at Anthropic, they had created another AI to basically trace the thoughts of the main AI that they were testing, Opus 4.8. And it was like kind of reward hacking a little bit, where it was giving, like, it would say that it had done something, but it actually hadn't done that. And they looked into it and they like saw what the AI was, thinking. And it was just interesting. The concept of lying is just, there's so much maliciousness tied to that word. But what this is actually doing, I don't know, can I think of a metaphor to describe it? It's like, the only thing I can think of is if you had a machine that made nails, and its primary function was to do that task, and it was so, well, it's kind of like the paperclip analogy that's often thrown around in AI, which is like the danger of the ambiguity of these systems is that if you eventually were able to tell an AI to like make everything into a paperclip, I don't even know if this is exactly how the paradox occurs, but you don't want your AI to systematically dismantle everything in the universe in order to make paperclips. And so, it's very interesting, it's very alien, and it takes a long time to even begin to start wrapping your head around it, And that's why I'm going to these meetups, because it's one thing to sit in my apartment and, clean a toilet while listening to a podcast about AI, but it's quite another thing to be in a room full of people who have all been experimenting with the same tools, with different desires for the outcome. and also to hear them talk about like their experience with them, because again, it's more interactive. Like if I listen to a podcast, even a Notebook LM one, that's like technically something that you can interact with, it doesn't hold a candle to speaking with a human about it, because I found that Notebook LM, even though it does allow for that interaction where you can basically pause it in the middle of it talking, and then you can clarify something or ask an additional question, or sometimes I will hear an episode and then I will go back and interact with it. I just missed my turn, of course, classic. But it seems like the context window that it is allowed to use for its responses is really very, very minimal, like the least amount of possible response that it could use in order to, deign you with a reply. And so, I should have gone. Dang. Like I said, this is like not an area that I have any familiarity with, but it's basically an area like everything else I would expect out here. Maybe a little bit more hoity-toity than Lilburn itself. Is this an opportunity for me to go? Maybe. Or am I going to get smushed by a freaking concrete truck? We'll see. Get smushed, y'all. Getting freaking smushed. Alright, let's try this again. Old Peachtree Street. Alright. Yeah, though, I mean, that is what I have enjoyed most about this, because, I certainly am not the average person who comes to these events, and now I have actually introduced myself twice as, yesterday was an amateur AI philosopher, because I was like, I wanted to call myself an AI philosopher just because I liked the thought that I had when I was biking, which is that it's not a vocation, it's a part of my identity. But then I was like, I feel like I'm getting, my head is getting dangerously close to my posterior, you know what I'm saying? And so I was trying to think of a way to make it a little bit more funny and diminutive. I don't know, in Spanish I would probably call it like Lido or whatever, I'm a little AI philosopher, That's how I feel, and interacting with real human beings in real life is a lot more satisfying than listening to even the best podcasts on the same material. And it's nice too, because they kind of feed back on one another, because anything amazing that I hear on a podcast or whatever is something I can immediately leverage in conversation with people. And so I'm interested to see, is it already really, my clock is fast in my car. I guess I've been going closer to the speed of light in this vehicle for sure. But yeah, what am I supposed to do? 7:29 or 9:29? Yeah, so I'm almost there. So I guess, for sake of being able to jump out of the car and run into the room, I'll leave it there for now and sign off with a classic love you. Bye.